Welcome to Real Talk Baseball. I am your host, Will Power, joined by John Murrow. Today's lineup, we have playoff must-adds, playoff sleepers, injury replacements, all coming up on Real Talk Fantasy Baseball. All right, welcome back, everybody. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. Like this video and subscribe to our channel. You can also scan the QR code in the top right corner. It will take you to all of our social media accounts, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts, where you can listen to the audio version of this podcast. Leading off today's show, we have, put it up there a little bit early, but I'll go ahead and put it on there now. Austin Riley replacements. Austin Riley. Oh, man. What a big hit for fantasy owners, man. Austin Riley's season-long numbers haven't really been... They've been underwhelming. 256 batting average, a 783 OPS. Riley was looking like one of the top fantasy busts of 2024 early on until June, when Riley started batting 289 with a 909 OPS. And the power returned as well, hitting 6 homers in June, 5 in July, and he already had 5 between August 1st and August 18th when tragedy struck in the form of a hit by pitch. Riley was diagnosed with a broken hand that will have him sidelined for 6 to 8 weeks. If you were an Austin Riley owner, I feel your pain because I too had him in 2 of my leagues. But luckily, that kind of prepared me for today's show, seeing as how I had to replace Riley in 2 of my lineups. Let's go ahead and take a look at third base replacement options, starting off with Ernie Clement, currently rostered in 12% of Yahoo leagues. In the last 2 weeks, Clement is batting 271 with an 821 OPS and 3 homers. Also has 4 stolen bases in the last 30 days, for what that's worth. Next, we have third base, second base, and outfield eligible Whit Merrifield, who was signed by the Braves in the wake of Ozzie Albies' injury. Merrifield is currently rostered in 12% of Yahoo leagues, signed with the Phillies earlier this season, and was terrible. Batted 199 with 3 home runs and 11 stolen bases. Since signing with the Braves, Merrifield is batting 258 with a 790 OPS, 1 home run, and 5 stolen bases. Next, we have Jorge Polanco, currently rostered in 29% of Yahoo leagues. Polanco is batting 277 with a 912 OPS, 6 home runs, and 1 stolen base in the last 30 days. Next, we have John Kensky Noel. Noel is batting 274 with a 951 OPS, 6 home runs in the last 30 days. And lastly, we have Gio Urshela, who recently was added to the Braves roster in wake of the Austin Riley replacement. All right. Let's see. John.
Well,
you have 5 names to choose from that I just mentioned. Let's go ahead and start with your top. Go rankings 1 through 5. Who is your favorite of this group?
Well, there's 2 names on there that you don't want to mention, and those are my top 2. So I'm going to give you 7 total. Well, I'll add 2 into the mix. But let's start with the 5 that you named. So going back to it, we'll talk about Ernie Clement. So I'll actually take him of the 5 that you said. I'll take him as my number 1. Hitting 271, 9 homers, 40 RBI, and a 723 OPS this season. You had mentioned since the beginning of August, he's hit 290. He has 3 homers in his last 6 games, shortstop and second base eligibility for the Blue Jays. So I'm going to take him for the top. We can talk a little bit more stats here too, but I'll kind of break down. So I'll take him as my first, Gio as my second, Whit Merrifield as my third. That one hurt a little bit, but here we are. Joe Hunt, help us out here. John Kensky Noel. Not great with that pronunciation. And then Jorge Polanco is my last. So I broke down Ernie Clement here for you. I'll talk quickly about the actual Austin Riley replacement in real life. So Gio Urshela, he's had a cup of coffee as a relevant fantasy baseball player before. That was last decade. It's 2024, and it's really time to reconsider Gio Urshela as a starter. This season, he's batting 254. He has 5 homers, a 621 OPS. So very, very, very average. He is a replacement player. He's not a guy that's going to excite you a whole lot, but you know what to expect. So there's no really reason to expect anything to change now. He's in the top 80th percentile in whiff percentage in baseball, NK percentage. He doesn't hit the ball hard. That he's actually in the bottom 7% in baseball for both hard hit percentage and bat speed. So as a real life Austin Riley replacement, I think the Braves will be hurting a little bit. Let's see if we can get you a good one for your fantasy team, though, as a replacement.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the Ernie Clement as the number one of this group. But you said you have a couple more that I didn't mention. Why don't you go ahead and talk about them a little bit?
Yeah, so of the ones you didn't mention, Jose Miranda is my true number one here. So Jose Miranda, without going too deep into his entire season, he's had a really sneaky good 2024 season. He's been bad of late, but on the year, he's hit 306, 9 home runs, 46 RBI for the Twins. And over his past 12 games, he's now finding himself being dropped. Over his last 12 games, he's hit 200. So struggling a little bit, but on the year, he's still hitting 306, 9 homers, and 46 RBI. So that's probably the guy I would target most that you're going to plug and play. And, you're not going to get Austin Riley at his best numbers, but you can still get a very productive replacement option. He's better than Gio Urshela.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The only thing with Jose Miranda is just he's been, ever since he got hurt, he came back and he started off kind of hot again, but I just haven't really seen much from him to make me want to add him again, So I like Jose Miranda in general out of all 5 of these, or out of all 6 of these, now that we added a 6th. But I just for fantasy playoffs, because he's not really hot and all these other players are, I think I'd skip over him. If it was earlier in the season, I'd probably take the chance on Miranda. Just like you said, he's probably the best replacement option for Austin Riley. He's really young still, 26 years old. Had great pedigree coming into the league. He was a top prospect. And I think the only other prospect we actually have on this list is Jhonkensky Noel.
Well, that's where I got one more for you, Mr. William.
All right, let's go.
Same name, Will Wagner, third baseman per ESPN. He also has second base eligibility in ESPN leagues. It's still really early, but I do like Will Wagner a lot. So he's only 8 games into his big league career. He was part of the UC Kikuchi trade that shipped him down to Houston and shipped Wagner up to Toronto. And in 355 plate appearances, he was hitting 315 before he got the call up for Toronto. So last year in Houston's minor league system, he hit 337. So he can hit. Now, he's a little on the older side for a prospect. I think he's 25, but this guy's going to get his chance for a Toronto team that struggled. He's still younger. We don't really know what he can do. So he's a lot more exciting than a Jose Miranda type. I can appreciate that. Plus, he's hot. He's hitting since the day he got called up just last week. So ride that train until it fades out.
So 7 names so far. If you were adding a player today, you said Jose Miranda is your favorite. Is that still for the playoffs? Like you want him for the playoffs over any of those other players?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess
Miranda, Will Wagner, Ernie Clement, Gio Urshela, Whit Merrifield, Jhonkensky Noel, and Jorge Polanco. So I'll kind of break down very briefly. I guess let me hop to my fifth here. So my 5th player, we already talked about Gio, who was my 4th. My 5th player in Whit Merrifield. I promise you, this isn't a homer pick. I will tell you, I watched enough of Whit Merrifield, and what he did this year was just it hurt my eyes to watch. So Phillies waived him. And as far as the chip on his shoulder, I thought that was kind of I literally thought he was joking that he had a chip on his shoulder that the Phillies cut him, but he was batting 199 for the Phillies. So since he's been in Atlanta about a month ago, July 22nd, he signed with the Braves. He's hit 258. So credit where credit's due. Okay, he's hitting a little bit better, but he's changed of scenery, and the same thing can be said for when he was in Philly. So I think he's a lot more of the 199 hitter than he is the 258 anymore. His legs are gone. He has no pop. So you're going to get singles. You'll get a couple runs here and there, but Whit Merrifield just doesn't do it for me anymore.
I think Whit Merrifield is actually, I think he might be, I don't know, he might be either like the least favorite on the list or at number 4 for me. You know, he was always been known as like a singles machine back in the day. He led the league in hits a few seasons ago. But since being traded from the Royals, there's been a pretty steady decline. I think because he was so bad playing in Philadelphia, like you said, he has a chip on his shoulder. He feels like he needs to go out with a bang. And, you know, there's determination there and there's track record from the past. Still 90th percentile on sprint speed. So the potential for doubles and stolen bases is there. He doesn't really steal bases anymore, but he could. Maybe he's just kind of like trying to prevent injury because he is on the opposite side of 30 now. I'd like Whit Merrifield as a player. You know, I wouldn't mind him actually like on my real team as like a utility player, fantasy wise, because he doesn't steal. Well,
it sucks, man. It's no fun.
Maybe because you have a bad taste in your mouth because he was on your team and he was just so bad. But like you said, since he's signed with the Braves, he's not doing so bad, right?
I mean, I'll always tell it as it is. When the Phillies signed him, a lot of people in Philadelphia were just very excited about it. I just thought he was just a fine bench piece to add, and none of this surprises me. I mean, I thought he'd be a little better. I think he should be a 225 to 240 hitter. So if you say, all right, this is my fantasy replacement for Austin Riley, that just doesn't do it for me, especially heading into the playoffs. If I can take a guy like Will Wagner, where I just don't know what I'm going to get out of him, but it's probably going to be at least 225. That works for me.
See, and that's how I kind of feel about Jhonkensky Noel. So I think he's the player on this list with the most potential. Before his call up to the majors, Noel hit 18 home runs in 65 games while batting 295 with a 937 OPS in AAA. Since his call up, Noel is batting 255 with a 913 OPS, has 10 home runs in 39 games. So, out of all the guys on this list, if you're searching for power, I think Noel should be at the top of your list. But like most rookie power hitters, with great power comes terrible plate discipline, 7 walks to 34 strikeouts. So, in points leagues, I think you got to be a little bit sketchy about Noel, but in a categories league, I think this guy's going to get you some pretty decent counting stats, home runs, RBI, and a few extra runs to go along with that as well.
And I think there's a caveat to this whole thing is that this obviously depends on what, if you're replacing Austin Riley, you're probably looking to get someone who has more pop. So maybe you are, leaning that way towards a Noel versus, trying to get a singles or doubles machine. But, for me on my team, I can't afford to add another guy like Noel because I have enough of them. I have Ellie De La Cruz. I have, just a bunch of strikeout machines, if I'm just saying it as it is. Noel's strikes out, I think I saw 30.4% of the time. So that's a tough pill to swallow. Even if it hits a home run, he's still going to lose you a point or two a game too. So,
and his walk rate is under league average. I think it's at a 6 or 7 point something. So league average is 8.4. If that's one of the things that I really look at in points leagues. I look at the walk rate, and if they're not at least at league average, that usually kind of tips the scales for me in not wanting to add that player.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, so there you have our Austin Riley replacements. Moving on to our next segment, we have where are we? Sorry, I'm going through my notes.
Oh, yeah. Must
adds. Here we go. Must add players for your fantasy baseball playoffs. John, go ahead and give me your first must add hitter.
Well, all right, let me start. We'll start hitters. So I'm trying to think of how I want to do this. I have 2 Mets on my list, so I kind of want to. I'll save it. Let's go with Brandon Lowe. I'm most excited about Brandon Lowe, and maybe my tone changes here a little bit, but when we start talking fantasy baseball playoffs, your blood should be rushing, and you should be pretty pumped. So For fantasy baseball playoffs, you got to take chances, but I don't think Brandon Lowe's a chance. And I can't believe that this guy is not rostered more. So he's actually only owned in 16.3% of ESPN leagues, which is unfathomable to me, and 52% of Yahoo leagues. Brandon Lowe does not have the world's sexiest stat line. He plays for the Rays. They're not good this year. They're quiet. So this guy's season has been so under the radar. And granted, he's hitting 244 on the year, but with 16 homers, 48 RBI, and an 820 OPS as a second baseman, Brandon Lowe's legit. And Baseball Savant, if you look at this guy's page, Baseball Savant also agrees with me. His expected batting average of 262, a lot better than the 244, still legit. His expected slugging percentage is 535, which is in the 95th percentile in baseball. Hard hit percentage at 83 percentile. He's in the 90th percentile in sweet spot percentage, barrel percentage, expected WOBA. So Brandon Lowe hits, and you need hitters when you get into the fantasy baseball playoffs. As a second baseman, this guy should already be on your roster.
Yeah, he's had some pretty high roster percentage in the past before, and I think that people just kind of got sick of like the ups and the downs, because Brandon Lowe is a big up and down type of player, very streaky. He'll have 1 month where he goes out there and hits 6 home runs with a 320 batting average and good on base percentage, but then the next month he'll have 1 home run batting 210, and he just like basically loses all 4 weeks for you just on his own, with all the strikeouts. And it really depends on what type of Brandon Lowe you're going to get, towards the end of the season. If he's hot, I would definitely like to add him, because, ride that hot streak as long as you can. But I think I like my first pick a little bit more, and that is the very hot, the red hot Gavin Lux. I know you don't like this pick, Ad. The eye roll, it gets me. Gavin Lux, second base and outfield eligible, currently rostered 47% in Yahoo. Gavin Lux was once a top prospect in the Dodgers organization and just hasn't been able to put it all together until now. Season-long numbers for Gavin Lux are very mid. 254 batting average, 706 OPS, 9 home runs, 4 stolen bases in 351 at-bats. But since the All-Star break, which was about a month ago, Gavin Lux is batting 366 with an 1101 OPS, 6 homers, 2 triples, 8 doubles. Expected batting average on the season is a modest 264, but expected batting average in June was a 278. Expected batting average in July was 279, and expected batting average in August is 303. The four-seamer, the changeup, the sinker, the cutter, and the splitter, Lux has an expected batting average of 333 or above on all those pitches this month. He is absolutely crushing the ball. His exit velos for the month of August are as high as they've ever been. 91.1 average exit velocity with an 11-degree launch angle, which is line drive city. I know most people are not buying into what he's doing, John included, but he's been doing it for 3 months. This is the first time in Gavin Lux's career that he's been given everyday at-bats. He was supposed to be the starting shortstop for the Dodgers in the 2023 season, had a really bad injury in spring training, and he was out for the whole season. Now this season, fast forward to 2024, Mookie was out. He was out 68 weeks. I think it was exactly 8 weeks. They needed someone to step up, and Gavin Lux was the guy. Gavin Lux is still the guy. Add Gavin Lux. His roster percentage should not be 70%. It should be 70% on the low side, not 47% like it is now. I think it needs to be closer 75, 80%. Yeah, that's basically all I got on Gavin Lux, unless you want to add something. I know I saw the eye rolls. I know you got some stuff going on in your head.
I don't hate Gavin Lux one bit. So I hate that I drafted Gavin Lux and he was dog shit for me, and then I dropped him. So that Gavin Lux I hate. No, Gavin Lux is a nice player. I think he was touted as the next, Dodgers superstar. And, it's not, sometimes those expectations on any prospect just aren't fair. So I think it's okay to tamper expectations and say, maybe, this is the Gavin Lux we should expect. And I also don't want to say that Gavin Lux is going to be, the 358 with 8 homers, 24 RBI, 17 runs, and an NL leading 1092 OPS since July 11th. But I think he could be a 275 with a 25 homer, 80 RBI kind of guy, which is a very good shortstop in baseball for a season. So I think he's definitely a good ad. I just want to tamper expectations on Gavin Lux because I think he can real quick.
Yeah, true. But now that the Dodgers are getting hot, hitting is contagious, in baseball. And because he's already gotten hot and he's been doing it for the better part of 3 months now, I don't really think that anything's going to slow him down, minus injury. It's really scary to say that because Dodgers
Big
get hit
minus.
by pitches a lot. And, he has the track record. Last season, he got hurt. So really hoping he doesn't. But I think Gavin Lux is a good ad. So that was my first. Let's go ahead and go to your second must-add hitter for fantasy playoffs.
All right, I'm just going to bang out the back-to-back Mets here. I'm a Phillies fan. That's pretty obvious at this point, I hope. And I hate the Mets. They are my least favorite team. But where credit's due, Mark Vientos, man. Mark Vientos is a stud. I've had Mark Vientos since May on my ESPN league, at least, and he's just been so much fun as my starting third baseman. So season stats on this guy are legit. He is hitting 280, 20 home runs, and 51 RBI. And he's one of the main reasons that the Mets are only 1.5 games out of the wild card spot. So the big thing for Vientos, if he can continue to cut down on his strikeouts, he'll be an elite hitter in the league for years to come. And he is definitely trending in the right direction. So last year, he struck out 30.5% of the time, walked 4.3% of the time. This year, he is down to 26.4 at the time, and he has increased his walk rate to 7.6. Everything else with Vientos, rock solid, man. I mean, it's a lineup that I don't trust, but it's, I would say, the best hitter in that lineup outside of Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That the Mets really missed on Brett Beatty. He was called up. He had the prospect pedigree. He was supposed to be like the next big thing in New York, and it just kind of didn't pan out. But what we've seen from Mark Vientos has been pretty impressive so far. He didn't have the pedigree that Brett Beatty did, until later on in the minors, and he's been pretty impressive, dude. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
If Mark Vientos and Pete Alonso are both Mets next year, Mark Vientos will have a better season than Pete Alonso will in New York.
Ooh, that's a bold prediction you got there. We got to remember that for next season.
Right.
All right. So that was John's. Moving on to my second. I have the former Dodger. Of course, I picked 2 Dodgers for mine, right? Jock Peterson, currently rostered in 50% in Yahoo, 20% in ESPN. So weird that it's like that. But anyway, for most of Jock Peterson's career, he's been the bigger half of a platoon player, mainly starting against righties, only because he is one of the biggest righty mashers in the bigs. This year has been no different, as Peterson is batting 294 with a 967 OPS, and 19 of his 20 home runs are against righties. No power against lefties, but Peterson has actually made a lot of quality contact against lefties this season, batting 261 with a 414 on base percentage and 849 OPS. Now, I know what you're thinking. Peterson's probably had a lot of good luck this season. We talk about good luck all the time with expected stats, but 282 expected batting average, a 522 expected slug, 92.8 mile per hour average exit velocity, 114.1 max exit velocity, 14.1% barrel rate, almost a 50% hard hit rate, 96th percentile on walk rate, career high batting average, career high OBP, career high slug, career high OPS, a perfect launch angle of 16.1 degrees, which analytics say that is the perfect launch angle for hitting home runs. Why is this man only rostered 53% of Yahoo leagues? With this season-long numbers, Jock Peterson should be at least 90% rostered at this point. I really don't understand what people are hesitating on.
I think there's the casual baseball fan, and then I think there's the people who love baseball and are following it a little bit more. And then I think there's the people like you and I out there. And I think even the casual baseball fan doesn't know what Jock Peterson is. And if you close your eyes and think of Jock Peterson, you're thinking about postseason success, and you're thinking about really his
October.
last, his last quarter. I mean, he always heats up this time of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to put on your jock straps.
That
Jock
was a good one.
Peterson, his last 7 games, he's hit 400. His last 15 games, he's hit 366 with 4 homers, and his last 30 games, he's hit 313 with 7 homers and 29 RBI. So you got to add Jock Peterson regardless of if you need an outfield spot.
Dude, seriously, like I think Jock Peterson, out of anyone that I've seen on like, the top ads or whatever, I think he is the one that I want to add the most. Whether I need an outfielder or not, there's always someone that I can drop for him to put in utility, outfield, like wherever it is. I'm trying to fit Jock Peterson into my lineups right now. Points leagues, categories leagues, I don't care what it is, especially because of what he's doing against lefties this season that he's never done before.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to the casual baseball fan, is that having Jock Peterson in your lineup and in out, facing pitchers it's extra work. Fantasy baseball is already work, and adjusting your lineup now to see if he's playing against those lefty matchups or righty matchups, but he's definitely hitting lefties a lot better. So
Yeah, which is why he's in the Diamondbacks lineup every single day. I think playing in Chase Field has actually been helping him too, because he was a Dodger for so long. He knows Chase Field. He played there lots of times, and Chase Field's a better hitting ballpark than, where he was before in San Francisco or even Dodger Stadium. So I like Jock Peterson in Arizona, and I hope they give him an extension and he stays there.
bold.
All right, moving on to must-add pitchers for your playoffs. Let's go ahead and go to your first must-add pitcher.
I'm going to rock with David Peterson of the Mets again. I'm going to say David Peterson for one reason only, and that is the Reynaldo Lopez effect. So David Peterson's an actual contender for the comeback player of the year in real baseball. Last year, he pitched to the tune of a 3-8 record with a 5.03 ERA, which is who I think David Peterson is, to be clear. Probably in the fours, but he's not the 7-1 record with a 3 ERA guy that he is this year. But this year he is. So David Peterson, he doesn't do anything great. He has an expected ERA of 5.16, which is not encouraging. I know that. You know that. But Reynaldo Lopez, same deal. So sometimes you just got to ride those hot hands and ride them while they're there. So the 3.00 ERA is not what it looks like on the surface, but it's still a 3 ERA, and he still has a 7-1 record for a team that's 1.5 games out of the playoffs. So they're going to ride him till he runs out of gas, and you should too.
And he's been getting a lot of run support, so you have a lot of opportunities for wins right there, like you mentioned with that 7-1 record.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to my must-add pitcher for your fantasy playoffs, JP Sears. Now, a lot of people don't even know the name JP Sears because of the team that he plays on, the Oakland A's, but currently rostered in 49% of Yahoo leagues, which is actually up 4% in the last week. So it looks like some fantasy managers are finally catching on to the skills. Sears had a terrible June, posting a 7.94 ERA in 5 starts, but since then, Sears has started 8 games and has allowed only 3 runs or less in each start, except when he faced the powerhouse of the AL West, the Astros, when he gave up 7 earned runs on 9 hits. That was pretty bad for my league because I have him in 2. Take away that start, JP Sears actually has a 1.60 ERA since July 1st. Other than the Astros, Sears has faced a lot of weak lineups, the Angels, the Red Sox, the Giants, but now upcoming matchups against the Brewers without Christian Yelich, the Reds, who are very up and down. They lost a few players, and they don't have the lineup that they should right now. The Mariners, the Tigers, and the White Sox. Great matchups for Sears going forward, and I really like him for fantasy playoffs, especially with those matchups. Man, I think you got a golden ticket right there.
Yeah, I think Sears is fine. I think he kind of falls in that category of guys who, he's had a couple really good stretches and he's had some really bad stretches. I don't think he's a guy that, you can really rely on or trust. But, ride the hot streak. 3.12 ERA in his last 30 games. Athletics haven't been terrible, and some favorable matchups will help him get some wins. So I like it.
Nice. All right, man. That was my first playoff pitcher. Let's go ahead and go to your second playoff pitcher.
Pitching's tough right now because you don't know who's going to get called up. You don't know, you got to ride hot hands. You got to see who's going to get called up. Might even see who gets waived. But for now, we'll get to the waive thing potentially too. But for now, I do like Zebby Matthews, Twins prospect. So he's the Twins number 6 prospect, and he's the number 84 prospect in baseball. He was just called up last week, and he's a fun watch. So he had a nice debut against the Royals, pitching 5 innings of 2-run ball. He had a similar outing last week or this week as well with San Diego, 5 Ks, but 2 walks, not as many strikeouts. He only had 1 strikeout, so it wasn't the best outing for him. What I do like about Zebby, outside of being on the Twins, outside of their playoff spot, and he's basically guaranteed a rotation spot at this point. 0.6 walks per 9 is elite. And before he got called up, he had a 6-3 record with a 2.6 ERA in the minors. So they're going to give him his chance. He's got a good offense behind him. They're right in the mix for playoff spots. So Zebby Matthews, I like his chances.
All right. That was John's second must-add starting pitcher for the playoff run. And going on to my second, I'm going with Bowden Francis, who's kind of been up and down all season. He's 33% rostered. For majority of 2024, Bowden Francis has pitched out of the bullpen while making some spot starts here and there. But since his shift to the starting rotation, Bowden Francis has been awesome. In 3 starts, Bowden Francis has a 2.16 ERA with 22 strikeouts in 19 innings. That includes a home start versus the Orioles a couple weeks ago when he pitched 5 innings, allowed 3 hits, 1 walk, and 2 earned runs while striking out 7. Bowden Francis has not been known as a strikeout pitcher, but in addition to striking out 7 Orioles in 5 innings, he also got 8 strikeouts in 7 innings pitched against the Angels and 7 strikeouts in 7 innings pitched against the Cubs, while only walking 1 during that 3-game stretch. Bowden Francis has looked great recently, and shifting into our playoff sleeper segment, Bowden Francis is actually my playoff sleeper as he has some pretty easy matchups going forward. The Angels tomorrow, followed by the Red Sox next week. The Phillies the following week, there's no secret there, seem to be declining. Sorry, not sorry, John. Followed by the Mets and the Cardinals in what might be your championship week. And honestly, I'd be okay with dropping Francis for that week, as the Mets and the Cardinals seem to be the toughest matchups Francis has the rest of the way. But it also has a lot to do with how he does against the easier matchups along the way. I think if he just comes and just like, shuts down the competition, I think he's going to take that momentum into the championship week against the Mets and the Cardinals. And debating on how he does, I think I might be inclined to keep him.
Chill. Bowden Francis? My thoughts on Bowden. You swayed me a little bit. Trust me, I was going to come on here and tell you he sucked. You did sway me a lot. So I don't, anytime, especially this late in the season, that someone just is switched over from a bullpen to a starting role, you can't trust it. I know that because I've been a pitcher, and it's just not even close to the same. So I don't know. It could catch up with him. Hopefully it doesn't. I think those strikeout numbers are legit. If he can go 7 innings pitch and is willing to, great. Maybe I think it's a tale of two. It's a coin flip that it can go one of 2 ways. That it could be really bad and they're just going to kind of let it roll, or they're going to stretch this guy out and ride him till he dies again to just see what they have for next year. Is this guy going to be a big piece and a starting part for them next year? Or I'm intrigued. You swayed me a bit.
He kind of reminds me of Cole Reagans in a sense, not because of, how good Cole Reagans is now, but just the shift from the bullpen to the starting rotation has been the key to his success. It kind of seems like, because he was not thriving in the bullpen, dude. And neither was Cole Reagans when Cole Reagans was in Detroit, I believe. No, I don't remember where he was, but now that he's in on the Royals, Cole Reagans has been just lights out, man, in the starting rotation, and in the bullpen before that, he was just kind of like very mid. And Bowden Francis wasn't even mid, man. He was just downright bad. So it's surprising to me to see that he can actually go 6, 7 innings, in a start, because like you said, transitioning from the bullpen to the starting role is not an easy thing to do. And he kind of just like made it look pretty easy. He transitioned very nicely.
I'm scared on the arm. I'm scared on the, being able to maintain that, because even it doesn't sound like it's a huge difference, but to pitch 1 inning a couple days a week versus 7 innings, maybe once or twice a week, is a huge difference on your body. And, if he's not used to doing that and he's not used to training for that, and the recovery for that is just completely different. So I
Yeah,
like Bowden Francis going into next year. I don't know.
I'm wondering how they got him stretched out so quick, going from like pitching one out in one game, and then the following game he goes 5 innings, and then the following game he goes seven, and then seven again in the next. It was really weird, but you know what? It's been working. So, and expected ERA during those starts has been pretty decent as well. With all those strikeouts, swings and misses. Granted, they were against the Angels. And the Angels are one of the worst offenses in baseball, especially without Mike Trout right now. So
I got an awesome Angels point for you, but go on, Cook.
I'm good. Let's go ahead and hear your point.
When you said Angels, you did trigger me, and it kind of alluded what I was going to talk about a little bit earlier on the waiver side of things. But this time last year, and I think this could play a huge point in potential fantasy baseball implications too for rosters. But do you remember last year when the Angels just at the trade deadline, they traded for Lucas Giolito, Reynaldo Lopez, Randall Grichuk, Dominic Leone, and then they just said, that didn't work. Let's just waive all those guys and see if Shohei likes it. So, with that said, too, we are in waiver season, and your boy Jason Hayward was just cut. How do
Yep.
you feel about that, number one? And then let's chat a little bit about some of the potential players that could move. And we're not talking about small names here. There's some that have already moved, some big names, and some potential really big names that could be moving here shortly. So give me some Hayward talk. I was a little bit shocked by the move. I was, as a obviously not a Dodgers fan, but Hayward, from an outsider perspective, kind of seemed like a huge impact in the clubhouse, and that's worth a lot more than just some, playing a couple days a week or a couple at bats here and there. And I was kind of surprised that they didn't keep him over Kevin Kiermaier.
Yeah, I mean, not only Kiermaier, but the reason why they put him on waivers is because Chris Taylor is now off the injured list. And dude, Hayward has been way better than Chris Taylor this season. Chris Taylor's barely batting over the Mendoza line. He has no power anymore, no speed. Okay, I get it. He can play infield also, but it's like you also have Kike Hernandez that's been kind of terrible, and I would much rather have Jason Hayward rather than either one of those two guys. Now, Chris Taylor is like, he's the guy that we got from Seattle years ago who's not really like a homegrown talent, but because he's been on the Dodgers for so long, it feels like he is, and Jason Hayward, I mean, he's been great this season compared to Chris Taylor. Chris Taylor has the glove. He has not a gold glove, but he's very serviceable in multiple positions. So he can move around the infield a lot and the outfield. He can play any outfield position and any infield position minus first base. So I don't know. And then Kike Hernandez has been always known as like a lefty masher, but how many lefties do you really face? In the playoffs, it could be depending on which team you're facing. So you definitely like to have Kike in the lineup against lefties. But, in a 3-game series, if you're facing 3 starting pitchers that are all righties, what are you doing with Kike at that time? He's just going to wait on the bench until the next series. What if you lose that series and then you just have him on your roster for nothing versus Jason Hayward? That's a pretty decent outfielder defensively, and he's got some pop, man. He hits home runs, he hits doubles, he's got some speed. I don't know. I didn't really understand the move, but
So here's what this comes down to. The Dodgers spent all their money on Shohei. They're now poor. They can't afford to pay any other players. They're going to be in shambles here shortly. this season's done. I'm just kidding. No, but it is really a weird move, especially, he seemed like he was very much liked in that clubhouse. So you're going to ruffle some feathers. You guys just brought in Kevin Kiermaier, and now all of a sudden he's replaced Jason Hayward. It doesn't make sense.
So weird. So weird. And Kevin Kiermaier the thing is they're still trying to replace Cody Bellinger's defense, and they had James Outman, who had pretty good defense, but his bat declined so much towards in the beginning of the season, basically all season. Going into fantasy drafts, James Outman was drafted a lot. I think almost universally, in 10 teams or deeper. And he just kind of crapped the bed and everyone just dropped him. And now, he's up and down from the minor leagues. And then we had Andy Pages come up and he was playing left field. Terrible defensive player. So I think they were just kind of looking at it on the defensive side. They were trying to get that Gold Glove in the outfield again. But Kevin Kiermaier is kind of old, man. So it's not like
yeah,
exactly. He probably should have retired already. But it's, as long as he's going to get a contract, just like everyone else out there, they're going to go ahead and keep on playing as long as someone's going to keep on paying him money, but I don't know. It was really weird, like you said, but that was not the first, I believe, of this, this like waiver period right now. There was another one that came up. I don't remember who it was.
Yeah. Hector Neris was just cut by the Cubs. He actually just signed with the Astros. Ty France was cut earlier this season. Josh Bell was cut. Of course, we talked about our friend Whit Merrifield. So those are some names that have already switched teams. And then I think there's a few teams and there's a few different players, but I think the team to really keep an eye on, and I kind of want to go back to that Angels thing in a bit, but the team that I could see doing a little bit like the Angels did last year would be the Rangers. The Rangers they're basically out of it. And I'm not going to say they're going to waive DeGrom or anything, but they've got a ton of pitchers that they can save a lot of money with. So this is what I'm talking about could really shake up a couple things here. Is some names I've seen that are rumored they can consider waiving would be Nathan Eovaldi, Kirby Yates, Jose Leclerc, David Robertson, and Andrew Heaney. I mean, those are 5 proven pitchers that the Phillies could sign 2 or 3 of those guys right now and be in so much better shape. So I would love to pick, and I know a lot of playoff teams would love to pick and choose from those guys. You can save yourself a ton of money. Why not?
Yeah. So now, do you? There's a lot of confusion about what waivers means and how a player can actually kind of like it's like a loophole in like the trade system, right? Like where you can put a player on waivers, which if they clear waivers, then that player is a free agent, and any team can sign them. But
yeah, it's just like our fantasy where you have a waiver, MLB has a waiver order as well, and teams can put in claims. You got to pay the rest of the salary or whatever's on their contract if you claim them. But it's basically saying, hey, look, we're done playing with this toy. Do you guys want to play with this toy? You got to pay for him, but do you want to play with him? And so I think there's going to be some more big names that are moving here shortly. It's not necessarily a trade. It's more, we're just done with this guy and we don't want to pay him. We can save ourselves some luxury tax money.
Yeah.
I think it's going to become a big trend in baseball over the next few years.
I don't think they do it anymore, but there was a term called a waiver trade in previous years where you could put a player on waivers, and if there's a team that actually does want him still, even after the trade deadline, then there's a team that could claim him off of waivers and potentially give something in return for that player. I don't think they can really do that now, but it was kind of like the loophole that I was talking about for, if you do want to do a trade after the trade deadline, but it's more for those players that, the team that currently owns that player doesn't really see much value in, and they kind of just want to get rid of them off their roster. And if no one does claim that player, then they're just outright DFA'd and they are gone and become free agents after that, which is, what we saw with Whit Merrifield, who was designated for assignment, cleared waivers, and then ultimately signed with the Braves. And there's probably going to be a lot of that going on because of what you said, like the payroll thing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another interesting one I just saw earlier too. Trevor Rogers was just optioned by the Orioles, which I mean, they just traded Kobe Mayo for him. I was confused.
Very weird. I don't know. Maybe they want to send him down to like work on some things and then bring him up before the playoffs. I don't know. He's still on the 40-man roster, so that is a little weird. But all right. So I do want to mention one thing before we sign off today. Former superstar Joey Votto has just announced his retirement. That's pretty crazy, man. I remember Joey Votto has been one of my favorite players, since I started really getting into baseball. He was like the Adrian Beltre of first base, always joking around and messing with players. He was just a fun guy to watch, man. And going from one of the best players in the league, former MVP, consistently batted 300 with a really high on base percentage, always was known for his plate discipline. And then he just kind of like fell apart, and it was really weird to see that from Joey Votto just go from like this elite player to the very next year where he was just unusable, and
he had one good year, but his downfall has lasted a lot. Let's call it 5-6 years. And he had one really good year sprinkled in there by accident. Not by accident.
Well, that one really good year, though, was completely different from his career, though, because he's always been kind of like the type that gets like 20 to 25 home runs with a really high on base percentage. And I think that year you're talking about, he hit like 38 home runs. So he sacrificed a lot of his just quality of contact for power. He's trying to hit the ball really hard that season, and it worked. And I think he tried to do that again the following season, and he just wasn't making the kind of contact that he was the previous.
All right, so we're talking about, we have a 266 in 2021 with 36 homers and 99 RBI. But in 2020, which according to you doesn't count, he hit 226. 2022, he hit 205. I mean, Joey Votto's a 294. He's a 294 average hitter, 356 homers, over 1,000 RBI. Joey Votto's probably a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think so. The thing is, he should have retired, 2 years ago, instead of just kind of like hanging on and trying to milk the last amount of baseball out of him that he could. The last couple of seasons have just been terrible. He signed with Toronto, and just because he wanted to go with his hometown team, because that's where he grew up. He's from Canada, so he's like, well, I might as well just sign with the team that I grew up rooting for. And I think that's great to hear stuff like that. Like Jack Flaherty, Jack Flaherty grew up a Dodgers fan, and now he's pitching for the Dodgers, and it's a great homer story, and I like to see that. I like to see, players go back and play for their hometown team. Like maybe Mike Trout will play for the Phillies, and Cole Hamels said that he would want to retire in a Phillies uniform. I don't know what team he rooted for growing up, but that's where he had. Did he really? Oh, I think I did hear that actually. But that's where he had all his success, was in Philly, and it would have been nice to see him in a Phillies uniform one more time before he retires, and look at what the Dodgers did for Matt Kemp, how they signed him on a one-day contract just so he could retire as a Dodger. Looking at Matt Kemp after he went to the Padres from the Dodgers, you could just see on his face, he was not happy to be in San Diego, and at the time the Padres were really not anything to be, excited about. So I know a lot of Padres fans were excited about getting Matt Kemp, who was, second in MVP voting a few years earlier than that. And, he was
San Diego or Atlanta first.
I don't know if it was first or second, but I remember San Diego the most because that is, the Dodgers' little brother. So that I used to watch the Padres games a lot more than I was watching Braves games, just because I was a West Coast guy, and you watch more. What's that?
He was in San Diego first from 2015 to then he got traded to Atlanta in 16.
Yeah, so it's always cool to kind of like hear those stories, but I still think after the Reds were done with Joey Votto, maybe he just should have like, hung up his cleats after that.
What's fascinating to me is, I mean, this is what's great about baseball. It's just I could, and part of what all of why I love baseball cards too. You can just read. I can read stats all day long. So, but it's fascinating that Matt Kemp only has 100-ish less RBIs than Joey Votto for his career. I don't think of them even close to the same level.
No, not at all. But Joey Votto was also part of a Reds team that was just not really good for a
Sure.
really long time. So they didn't have the lineup context that the Dodgers did while Matt Kemp was, on the Dodgers. They had Adrian Gonzalez and Andre Ethier, and there was so many all-stars on that lineup during Matt Kemp's tenure in LA that Joey Votto didn't really have a lot of guys around him that were helping his counting stats. He had to do that all on his own. So that's a little context.
I know we got about 10 minutes here. Let's talk about a couple other things if you want to.
Yeah, you said you wanted to bring something up a little bit later if we had time.
Yeah, I got one. Jordan Walker, big prospect guy, and Jordan Walker just was. I thought he was going to be the next, not face of baseball, but between him, Cabrian Hayes, there's some guys that have just not panned out. But Jordan Walker, I mean, you can kind of cut the tension with a knife, and I think he's going to get traded this offseason.
I think he should,
and I think that'll ultimately bring his fantasy value back.
I think the Cardinals have kind of like wasted his potential, and there's other teams that develop bats a hell of a lot better than the Cardinals do. The Cardinals are known for developing their pitching, and like guys like Adam Wainwright, and guys like Jack Flaherty, that eventually moved on to other teams. But, the reason why they let go of Flaherty is because of the injury history, but they didn't realize that he was going to be the type of pitcher that he is now. They probably would have held on to him. But the Cardinals are not the greatest at developing their hitting, but the Rays are. I could definitely see a potential trade between the Cardinals and the Rays and giving up, that type of player for someone from the Rays. Like the Rays gave up Randy Arozarena. They know that they're not in playoff contention anymore. So they were like, all right, well, we're going to go ahead and work from the ground up and trading for Christopher Morel, and guys that they see potential in that potentially have, star power in them. And I still see Jordan Walker as that player, and there's a lot of other guys too, like Joe Adell, from the Angels that would thrive on another team. I think, there's a lot of teams that are very good at developing their players, whether it's pitching or hitting or whatever. And there's a lot of teams out there that are known for not developing, like the Padres come to mind. They do not develop their players very well. Like how many homegrown talent players are on the Padres? You don't really hear about that. They make these like signings, or they have these prospects that are doing really good in the minors and then trade them before they even make it to the majors. So that way they can get something good in return. And even guys like Tatis, that a lot of people may think is a homegrown talent in San Diego, he was traded from the White Sox, for
that was so early though. I'll still count him as homegrown.
I guess, but he was only there you go. James Shields. I always mix him up with Jake Shields, the former UFC fighter. But yeah, that's my spiel on developing.
Yeah, no, I like it. Any other guys you could see that might get cut and could sign with another team?
There's a lot, man. I think I would have to like analyze like every team and be like, oh, that one's for sure, that one's for sure, that one's for sure. It's just thinking about it now. It would have to be teams that are like out of playoff contention, and or just, teams that are trying to cut salary. Like I could see the Red Sox doing it, but
Red Sox are very much in it. Very much in it.
Yes and no. There's still some players on their team that are just not doing very well that they could DFA to make room for when Tristan Casas comes back, if he comes back this season.
Casas is back.
Is he back?
Casas is back. He's quiet, but he's back.
Yeah, he was a big guy going into this season also. I had him on my fantasy radar, and then I actually had him in a couple leagues, and he just kind of he did me dirty. He didn't do it on purpose, but
I
That's
traded. You know about my Casas trade, right? I think I told you about that.
you told me about it. Remind me.
So I traded right as Casas was about to come back, maybe like a week or two before he was coming back. I flipped Tristan Casas and Nick Gonzalez for Blake Snell, which has worked out pretty well for me.
Yeah, nice.
Just a no hitter and averaging 25 ESPN points a game. So
Yeah, I honestly though, even with that, I still don't trust Blake Snell. Blake Snell has,
what if they DF? What if they waived him?
yeah, right. That's not gonna happen
Why?
because they want to extend him. They want him to stay there, and he pitchers usually thrive in San Francisco, which is really weird that he didn't do very well in the first half, but then he did he went on the injured list and then he came back. And then we see the Blake Snell that was, more like the Cy Young caliber pitcher that we saw last season without all those walks. I think I even said this before, like he just needs to cut down on the walks, and his expected stats won't be so bad. But his expected ERA last season was so high, so inflated because he was walking so many batters, and it's like you give up a solo home run. Oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. You're down 1-0, but if you walk the two guys before that, and then you give up a home run, that's a whole different story, and that kind of seemed to be the story for Blake Snell. But the good thing about him playing in San Diego is San Diego's is where you go for home runs to die, and I feel like that's why he pitched so well in San Diego, even with all those walks. It's because he was giving up a lot of hard contact. But, those balls that should have been home runs in probably 25 other ballparks, they were just falling in San Diego right into Tatis's glove. So, take what you want from Blake Snell, but I'm willing to just kind of let him go. He's too up and down for me. I don't care about his Cy Young from last season because pitching in general in the National League last season wasn't what it was in previous seasons. Honestly, there's at least one or two other pitchers that I would much rather have seen win a Cy Young, Zach Wheeler being one of them, last season. But Zach Wheeler's ERA was a little bit too high. I think his expected ERA was a little bit lower than his actual ERA, but his ERA was above 3. I think it was slightly above 3 last season for Wheeler. So I would actually have voted for Wheeler for Cy Young rather than Blake Snell last season.
I mean, personally, I probably would have too, but you can't say Cy Young doesn't matter. I mean, the guy's got 2 of them.
No, I mean, it just doesn't matter to me personally, not in general. Of course, Cy Young matters. He's going to go down in history books. He has 2 Cy Youngs. How many pitchers can say that they've done that?
Corey Kluber. So, all right, is Blake Snell? If he retires today, he's not a Hall of Famer.
No,
but how many guys have 2 Cy Youngs that are in that conversation for Hall of Fame? It's a weird. Blake Snell has one of the most fascinating careers. Just everything he's done with his postseason and pitching 4 innings, and it's just a really weird career.
Yeah,
he's a weird dude. I like him, but he's a weird dude.
I think San Francisco and San Diego were kind of doing him right though, because they were kind of just letting him go until he reached 100 and something pitches, versus when he was with the Rays, where they were just like, well, you're coming up on the 3rd time through the order, so we're going to go ahead and take the ball away from you now. The analytics were a little bit too much in Tampa Bay, which is good and bad. I think that's one of the reasons why Tampa Bay has been so successful in the past with one of the lowest payrolls in baseball. But, there's also something to be said about old school baseball that is a little bit better than analytics sometimes, and that's where managers come into play. It's like, yes, analytics are extremely important. There's new analytics coming out all the time. Like we were talking about bat speed that just came out, and expected stats, and how hard you hit the ball, and average exit velocities, max exit velocities. There's so much that you can look at. But there's also some coaches out there and some scouts that they see the talent from from their vantage point, versus just looking on paper like we do. We look at a lot of stats, a lot of underlying stats versus like, actual numbers versus expected numbers and stuff like that. That's what we do as analysts. And that's what a lot of majority of the analysts do now, versus the old heads that used to go out and actually physically watch these players pitch or hit, or that's how Justin Turner got discovered. He was DFA'd by the Mets, and he was playing in a Cal State Fullerton alumni game with a Dodger scout sitting in the stands, and was like, I see something in this guy. And then he becomes one of the best third basemen in the league for the next 5 years or 6 years or something like that after that. So there is something to be said about old school scouting, versus analytics, but it seems like just analytics has just kind of like taken over the league.
Yeah, no, that's fair. You still got to pass the eye test, and heading into your fantasy baseball playoffs, you can't just rely just strictly on numbers. You got to go a little bit of gut too. You got to take some chances. That's what it's going to take to win. Before we head out of here, Will, I'm not going to say let's start a new segment here, but let's do a one bold prediction before next week. It can be anything in the league you want
for this season.
For next week, what's gonna change from now until next week? So I'll start off. So my example, and part of the reason I did bring this up, I think the Phillies are going to land at least 2 guys out of waivers. So I'll stick with Phillies just because obviously I'm a homer pick on this one, but I think they're going to land 2 of the guys on the potential cuts for the Rangers. So I could see they've always loved Nathan Eovaldi, and I could see them getting him in like a Kirby Yates or get Robertson back or something. So I think it would be so much fun just to see what happened with the Angels last year, just kind of throw everyone off in the baseball world again. Like last year, all of a sudden, Lucas Giolito was just a free agent in August. We're like, the hell's happening? So if that happened again, that's fun. So I'll call. They're going to get at least 2 of those guys. What do you got? It could be anything.
A bold
Jason
prediction.
Called out. I don't know.
Yeah, that was weird, but I think a bold prediction, I'm going to say, I'm going to go ahead and be a homer. And I think that Walker Buehler has been very underwhelming this season, but I think that going forward, he's going to change things around, and he's going to be the pitcher that we know that he can be, that he's been in the past. He's coming up on free agency next season. He has something to prove. He's going to want a big contract, so he needs to finish strong. And I think the only way he's actually going to get somewhat of a decent contract, I think he's either going to get an extension with the Dodgers, or another team is going to sign him for a 1-year deal for probably about $20 million, which is the going rate for a starting pitcher for 1 year. And I think that he's going to finish strong this season, and he's going to get the 1-year deal for next year, and then he's going to sign a huge contract after next season.
I like that prediction. I'm only going for 1 week, though. So if you're going to tell me this next week that he's going to dominate the Orioles, I don't think so.
Okay. So if Walker Buehler's next start is against the Orioles, I'm going to predict 6 innings, 5 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks.
How many Ks?
That's so hard because he's not a strikeout pitcher anymore. I'm going to say 4. 4 strikeouts.
I like it.
I got to write this down when I rewatch this episode.
Yep.
That way we can come back and be like, I told you, John, I was off by 1. Hopefully.
1-0 as he gave up 10 runs and 3 innings.
No, don't say that. Don't give him that bad juju. Not today.
Not a Dodgers fan, baby.
All right, guys, we have reached the end of the show. We're at 1 hour and 3 minutes. If you haven't already, make sure you like this video and click that subscribe button. Scan that QR code in the top right corner. It will take you to all of our social medias. And make sure you follow, like, and subscribe all of our stuff. And all right, I am Will Power, and this was John Murrow for Real Talk Fantasy Baseball. And we'll see you guys next week.
Pleasure.
Peace.